Okay, so just a couple of housekeeping things from me before we officially start the webinar. Just a reminder, we are recording the webinar and we will share with you afterwards. We have a Q&A function where you can type your questions and during the session, so you can type throughout the session or you can at the end once you've fully heard the presentations. If you can please use the Q&A rather than the chat, it makes it much easier for us to get round to and see all of your questions. Just in case some of you have come up, sometimes when you join the Zoom call as a default, it puts your device or something else. So make sure you can, if you can change your settings so that it's your name that's coming up, so that if you're asking a question, we can attribute those correctly to you. So I can see still a few people are joining, but we're at 22 people now. So I think it's a good time for us to get started and those joining can catch up. So I'd like to introduce you all to our two speakers today, Jenny and Belinda. Both are from GSMA's Mobile from Humanitarian Innovation Program. And they're going to tell you about themselves and about that project. So I won't talk too much, other than to say thank you very much, ladies, for taking the time today. And I'm going to hand over to you, and we look forward to hearing about the work that GSMA are doing.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Caswell, and I'm the Senior Insights Manager for the Mobile for Humanitarian Innovation Program at GSMA. I'm going to start off this webinar and then hand over to my colleague, Belinda. So the topic of today's webinar is focused on mobile money-enabled cash and voucher assistance. At the GSMA, we've been exploring this topic for a number of years, and we've seen huge potential in leveraging mobile money in humanitarian contexts. And we believe that mobile money can be the future of CVA, but only in contexts where it makes sense. So from the research that we've done to date, we've seen that the potential of mobile money for cash aid delivery will only be realized when humanitarian organizations and mobile money providers can forge long-term partnerships and customize their services for beneficiaries. So today we're going to take you through our latest research in the hope that it can help you decide when and where mobile money may be a suitable cash aid delivery modality. And we're also going to try and help you identify how to maximize the potential benefits for people affected by crises. So I'm just trying to flick to the next slide. Okay, so in terms of the agenda for this webinar today, I'm going to start off by giving you a brief introduction of GSMA and our Mobile for Humanitarian Innovation Program, M4H as we call it, for those of you who are less familiar. And then I'm going to share some of our latest research that's actually yet to be published, which looks at the state of digital ecosystems in refugee contexts to try and help set the scene. And then we're going to dive into the findings from the mobile money handbooks, which you may have seen already, which my colleague Belinda will take you through. She'll also take you through some of the recommendations stemming from that research, and at the end we'll have some time for Q&A. So first, just to give you some background on who we are and why we're focusing on this topic. GSMA is the trade association for mobile operators, and we represent the interests of over 750 mobile operators around the world. Today, 3.8 out of the 5 billion active mobile subscribers are located in low and middle income countries. And that's why within the GSMA, we have a department called Mobile for Development, which sits under the foundation arm at the GSMA. And we focus on leveraging mobile technology for social impact in these countries. So we try and explore commercially viable business models to ensure that services can be sustainable in the long term. And so as you can see from this slide, these are our 10 existing programs within M4D. I'm not going to run through all of them, but just to give you a flavor of some of the programs that you may be familiar with. So the bottom one is our mobile money program that's been running for a number of years at the GSMA, and it works with mobile operators and other ecosystem players to accelerate the digital financial ecosystem for underserved populations. Another example of a team that we work very closely with within our humanitarian program is the Connected Women team. They work with commitment partners who are mobile operator members to try and reduce the gender gap in both mobile internet and mobile money customer bases, with the aim of accelerating digital and financial inclusion for women. Today they have 38 mobile operators who are commitment partners, and they've made commitments in 53 countries. One of our latest, newest programs that has just launched is called Assistive Tech, and we work to improve the accessibility of mobile services for persons with disabilities. But for today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on Mobile for Humanitarian Innovation, which is the program that Belinda and I work on, and I'm going to tell you more about it on the next slide. So our M4H program, our overall objective is to accelerate the delivery and impact of digital humanitarian assistance, with the overall objective of building out a digital ecosystem in humanitarian contexts. Our program is funded by DFID, the UK government, and we were launched in February of last year, so we've been running for just over 1 year. Why do we exist? We've seen in our work on this topic over the years that the humanitarian sector is increasingly recognizing the really important role that mobile technology can play in both achieving efficiency gains in the delivery of dignified aid, but also as an essential tool for people affected by crises. So we've seen the ability for displaced people to use their mobile phones to communicate, access crucial information, including things like education, finance, and health services, regardless of where they are in the world, is really vital. So our role is to act as the bridge between mobile network operators, our members, and our partner humanitarian organizations to catalyze these partnerships and help these two very different sectors speak the same language so they can effectively digitize humanitarian assistance. On the right-hand side of this slide, you can see that we focus on 5 thematic areas. These are all areas that we've been focusing on across our Mobile for Development programs over the past up to 10 years. But now we're looking at these topics with a humanitarian lens. So as I mentioned, today we're going to be focusing on the topic of mobile financial services, but it's really important to note that we are looking at the entire digital ecosystem, which we think is absolutely key when we're considering linkages to financial inclusion for people affected by crises. But also this ecosystem approach is really important for building out the business case and the commercial viability for mobile operators so that they can provide these services in the long term, beyond humanitarian into development contexts. So how do we work as a program? This slide shows how we try and achieve our vision. The program has 3 work streams. The first work stream, which Belinda and I work on, is the research and insights stream. And the aim of this stream is to build out an evidence base to understand better the challenges as well as the opportunities to digital solutions in humanitarian contexts. Secondly, we have a strategic partnership team, and they're the ones who are catalyzing partnerships between the private sector and humanitarian organizations on the ground. Within the market engagement stream, we also run an innovation fund, and we're currently providing grants of up to £500,000 to projects which are providing solutions to challenges that are associated with forced displacement and complex humanitarian emergencies. We've just launched our 3rd round, which will be open until the 7th of June, and Belinda will tell you more about the fund at the end of this webinar. So lastly, our 3rd work stream focuses on advocacy and policy to try and support and promote an enabling environment to ensure that these digital humanitarian solutions can work. We also have a strong emphasis on M&E across all of our programs, as well as strong convening power where we bring together public and private stakeholders to raise the profile of key issues. So now getting into the meat of the webinar, we know that mobile money has the potential to be a transformational tool, not least for cash and voucher assistance delivery. The benefits are, I think, well known by the sector, both humanitarian organizations and mobile network operators. Some that are frequently referenced are mobile money's ability to increase transparency, reduce fraud and theft, increase fast and flexible delivery, and also have greater linkages for people affected by crises to financial inclusion. But one thing that we've been finding is that it's not quite so easy, and I think that as many humanitarian organizations began to leverage mobile money in the early days, they potentially saw mobile money as a cheap and easy delivery mechanism. But as one of our stakeholders that we interviewed for this research said very well, mobile money is not just a tool for CVA delivery. It needs to be actively managed and invested in if it's going to be used to transform society. So, one of the things that we've seen, and the reason why we do our research, is because we've come to realize that the potential transformational benefits of mobile services like mobile money for refugees and other forcibly displaced populations, if we're going to realize those benefits, we really need to start with a robust understanding of how these people are currently using and accessing mobile services, as well as having a better understanding of the interventions that are needed to overcome barriers to access and use. So in the research and insight stream, we've been conducting research to try and fill this evidence gap that exists around refugees' access and use of mobile. As this slide shows, in 2018, we set out on a research project in partnership with UNHCR to better understand the digital ecosystems in 3 very unique refugee contexts. So you can see these on the slide. We focused on Bidi Bidi settlement in the north of Uganda, Kiziba refugee camp, the oldest camp in Rwanda in the west of the country, and with urban refugees in Jordan. We undertook nearly 3,000 face-to-face surveys with both refugees and with host community members, and we also conducted qualitative research to complement the quant findings. First, and as this slide shows, we really wanted to have a better understanding of mobile penetration. So, because we often find that there's limited data on this, and the assumption is often that people own a phone. Our findings show that refugees access mobile services in very different ways, depending on their context, sharing or borrowing different types of handsets. So in terms of phone ownership, this is the red segment, you can see that almost all refugee respondents in Jordan own a phone, probably an unsurprising finding, compared with 62% in Kiziba and slightly less than half of respondents in Bidi Bidi at 49%. And similarly, we found that ownership of an internet-enabled phone was highest in Jordan, compared with less than 50% of people in Kiziba and Bidi Bidi. And so, importantly, for those people who do not own handsets, borrowing is a really important way of getting connected. And this is the segment represented in the teal color. So this trend is highest in Bidi Bidi, where 37% of people are borrowing a handset. And in Kiziba, this is 19%. So in the qualitative research, we found that being reliant on borrowing a handset can put people, particularly women, at a disadvantage. This is because where people who own a phone are able to use their phone for people who own a phone have access to information at all times, those who borrow have to wait until the mobile is available to use. And so we also found in the research that there are really quite significant mobile gender gaps across both mobile ownership and mobile use. Just to give you an example, in Bidi Bidi, women were 47% less likely to own a mobile compared with men. And this gender gap sadly increases for more advanced use cases like mobile internet, where that gap was 89%. To our knowledge, this is one of the first times that this mobile gender gap has been quantified in humanitarian contexts. And we hope that having these nuanced behaviours and also discrepancies in terms of mobile use and access across different refugee groups, as well as across different contexts, are really important for humanitarian organisations and mobile operators to have a better understanding of when they try to then digitise their humanitarian assistance, especially when we're thinking about mobile money enabled CVA. So within the research, we also looked at the use of mobile money. As you can see on this chart, we focus primarily on Kaziba and Bidi Bidi because in Jordan, as you are probably aware, mobile money is still very nascent. We found that only 1% of the refugee population were using mobile money, although this is increasing rapidly. But this reflects the trends of usage of mobile money within the Jordanian population. So we found that mobile money uptake is highest in Kaziba at 59% and still fairly high in Bidi Bidi at 44%. Some of the reasons for this we found in the qualitative research were that there was a really high value proposition for using mobile money in Kaziba because lots of people were talking about how they were using it to pay for their children's school fees and also sending money to their children who were studying outside the camps, which was really common. We also found that the most common use cases of mobile money were P2P, so domestic person-to-person transfers, buying airtime, and also remittances, so international transfers. And we found that this use of remittances was particularly high in Bidi Bidi because people were talking about sending and receiving money from and to people who were still in South Sudan. We found that in Kaziba, because the nature of the crisis is more protracted and people have been there for over 20 years, there were a small number of people who were sending money overseas to Congo and other countries. In Bidi Bidi, we also found that there is a significant mobile money gender gap. Women are 35% less likely to use mobile money compared to men, and we heard frequently that people do not have the digital skills to be able to use mobile money. So from the qualitative research, we had quite a few instances similar to this woman who explained that she said, I need help using mobile money. I don't know how to use it. I don't know where to take it to get help. I give the phone to someone who knows how to use it and they will check the money is there and then withdraw the money. So this illustrates that ongoing training is really important for beneficiaries to make the most of mobile money and is an important consideration for humanitarian organizations who may be considering mobile money enabled CVA. So this research will be published next month, and hopefully it will provide you with a unique data set and some insights for humanitarian organizations who are seeking to design digital interventions that can better serve the populations that they work with and ensure that the most vulnerable are not left behind. So this is my last slide, and hopefully this research helps to set the scene in terms of identifying important considerations when deciding whether mobile money may be an appropriate service for the delivery of cash aid, whilst also helping to identify and tackle barriers to realize the transformational benefits of mobile money for these people in the long term. So with that, I am going to hand over to my colleague Belinda, who's going to take you through the mobile money handbooks and get more into the operations.
Great, thanks, Jenny. So to start, it's important to emphasize the fact that the humanitarian sector has moved from a protracted period of research on the potential use of cash as aid to strong recommendations through the grand bargain on significantly increasing its use. As the use of cash increases, humanitarian organizations are continually looking for ways to improve cash delivery mechanisms. As Jenny mentioned, leveraging mobile money to deliver CVA has the potential to increase efficiency by offering a faster, more secure and transparent means of getting help to people who are most in need. We at the GSMA developed two handbooks, one for humanitarian organizations and one for mobile network operators, with the overall objective of helping the industry collaborate to overcome pain points associated with operationalizing mobile money in humanitarian contexts and to unlock the opportunity it presents. Each handbook delves deeper into the aspects that each stakeholder needs to understand for these partnerships to work. And though there is naturally an overlap between the two handbooks, The overarching message is that collaboration and a shared value proposition are key to the success of mobile money-enabled CVAs, but that there are specific aspects of the journey that MNOs need to be aware of and focus their attention on, and others for humanitarians to do the same. So, to create the handbooks, we essentially set out to answer this question. How can humanitarian organisations and mobile money providers collaborate to unlock this opportunity? So at the start of last year, we consulted industry experts to better understand their experiences with leveraging mobile money for CVA. These industry experts included key stakeholders from the humanitarian sector, including UNHCR and Mercy Corps, as well as mobile network operators such as MTN Uganda and Zain Iraq. We undertook over 50 key informant interviews and convened 2 in-country workshops in Uganda and Jordan to help us uncover the opportunities, but also the pain points associated with using mobile money for CVA. We also did on-the-ground work with site visits in Uganda, Jordan, and Somaliland to make sure we understood how mobile money was working in reality within humanitarian contexts. Some of the pain points identified included lengthy contracting periods, misaligned expectations, fast-changing regulation, liquidity challenges, and others. Many of these may resonate with you, and which we are hoping these documents and the other engagements the Mobile for Humanitarian Innovation team and the wider Mobile for Development team are involved in can help alleviate. So let's start with the Handbook for Humanitarians, which begins with providing a 101 on mobile money. As many of you will be aware, for over a decade now, mobile money has been transforming access to financial services around the world. The GSMA publishes the Mobile Money State of the Industry report every year, and the 2019 version was published in February. The overall story is that the scale of mobile money continues to grow. As at the end of 2018, globally, there were 272 mobile money deployments live in 90 countries across Africa, Asia Pacific, Latin America, Asia, and the Caribbean, and 866 million registered mobile money accounts, an increase of 20% from 2017. Despite most growth taking place in Asia over the last couple of years, Sub-Saharan Africa is still the leader in mobile money, and owing to its stage of development, has a more saturated market, hence the slowdown in the growth in comparison to other regions. Mobile money providers are looking for ways to reach new customers, especially within somewhat mature markets such as those in Sub-Saharan Africa, where traditional products and services are well known and adopted. Using mobile money as a mechanism to disperse cash and voucher assistance presents a new opportunity for both humanitarian organisations and mobile money providers. So, leveraging mobile money will not be feasible everywhere, and the GSMA has data to help with this initial assessment of where it has the potential to be most effective for CVA delivery. To create this map, we overlaid very high-risk countries are facing humanitarian crisis, according to UNOCHA in 2016, with high potential mobile money countries, which are countries where mobile money accounts exceed bank accounts. It should be noted, though, that for many of these countries, the mobile money industry is not very developed, but is probably more developed than the banking sector, and therefore potentially the best digital payments mechanism available. So the dark green countries are those that are both considered very high risk and are high potential mobile money countries. So the countries highlighted are DR Congo, Somalia, Chad, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Rwanda. The light green countries are where there is some risk of humanitarian crisis and that have also been identified as countries where mobile money could work. So there is a bit of a mismatch of countries receiving most cash aid and mobile money maturity, such as in Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine, but there is good overlap in countries that are using mobile money, for example, in Iraq, Jordan, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. Just to note, though, this map is by no means an exhaustive map, and a number of other conditions must also be met for mobile money to be used to its full potential. As well as looking at the maturity of mobile money, it's also essential to understand whether a location has an enabling environment for mobile money operations. The enabling factors we identified are relevant to functioning mobile money deployments more generally, wherever it happens in the world. But when we are looking to transfer cash via mobile money to displaced populations specifically, there are additional complexities to consider, including identity documentation for know your customer requirements, ensuring an accessible and liquid network, ensuring that the end users are sensitized to mobile money, and so on. For humanitarian organizations, this starts with understanding the mobile money market in your country of operations. At a localized level, as just mentioned, it is important to understand the enabling environment for mobile money. This readiness journey is a simple but helpful way to assess the enabling environment and the amount of time and investment that will be needed to leverage mobile money for CVA in a particular location. And the GSMA has rich data that can help understand the environment. So here we have identified 4 stages. Stage 1 involves the extent of connectivity within the location of operation. In the worst case scenario, where no coverage exists, significant investment of time and money is necessary to extend to the area. So investment is heaviest at this stage, but it also has the biggest potential for impact and likely offers the highest return, especially for mobile network operators that will gain access to a new customer base, both beneficiaries and host communities who could use both mobile money and mobile connectivity services, including voice and data. So the GSMA has coverage maps that have localized data on 2, 3, and 4G coverage overlaid with UNHCR population data that can help potential humanitarian organizations understand the connectivity levels in a particular location. So stage 2 involves understanding the available financial infrastructure in a location, which covers both the retail outlets where transactions are made, such as agents, bank branches, and ATMs, and the hardware used to interact with them, such as mobile handsets and cards. GSMA's Mobile Money Metrics website has a list of all live mobile money deployments, the type of products and service they have, and a number of other key metrics, and the downloadable mobile money deployment tracker. The site also hosts the Mobile Money Regulatory Index, which scores countries based on the extent to which their regulatory framework enables widespread mobile money adoption. So stage 3 goes beyond the prerequisite hardware and infrastructure needed for mobile money to operate and starts focusing on ensuring that there is an aware and registered beneficiary population that can reap the benefits of the service. This stage involves investing time in educating people about financial services and the potentially long-lasting benefits of digital inclusion with a focus on digital literacy. Essentially, at this stage, there is a greater focus on product and service design, customer service and applicability in humanitarian context rather than the physical infrastructure. And stage 4 is the scenario where we have regular users and is the best case scenario for leveraging mobile money, where preparation and investment has already taken place in stages 1 to 3. So beneficiaries at this stage are registered, digitally literate, understand the benefits of mobile money, and access a wide range of services. However, due to the complex and unique environments where forcibly displaced people are, it's likely that the majority of locations that humanitarians work in are between stages 1 and 3. So it should be recognized that the decision to go digital does not come without cost, and it's essential to work closely with mobile money providers to understand the existing infrastructure and level of usage of mobile services. Investment in tailored customer service, infrastructure, hardware, and time are all key to ensuring successful deployment of mobile money in these contexts. The GSMA resources mentioned can go some way in helping humanitarian organizations with understanding the state of mobile coverage and mobile money in a location, and we are happy to share these resources with anyone who is interested after the webinar. So, if a location is in stages 1 or 2 of their mobile money readiness journey, as just explained, with limited coverage and mobile money maturity, the humanitarian sector will need to work with mobile network operators to make the business case for mobile money enabled cash and voucher assistance. It is important to remember that in most countries, CVA is an amalgamation of a diversity of relatively small short-term transfers made by a number of different organizations, and consequently, the potential revenue generated for mobile money providers directly from CVA program relative to other mobile services may be relatively low, and therefore not enough for a mobile money provider to justify extensive investment. So it's really, really important and essential to make the business case work for mobile network operators to invest and make it sustainable. So we believe that this can be achieved by building the digital ecosystem. So looking at this diagram, on the y-axis, it's important to consider a holistic approach rather than only considering CVA programs to expand revenue opportunities. There are a range of use cases for mobile money and broader mobile products for host communities, humanitarian staff, and others. So looking beyond a single CVA program and looking into ways to aggregate CVA programs and extend the reach of mobile connectivity and mobile money services to the greater displaced community and others in the vicinity. Cash working groups could be a good way of aggregating demand and syncing up CVA programming, for example. On the x-axis, think longer term, beyond one short-term CVA program, as mentioned, but also start to consider a long-term partnerships and links into development and government actors whose objectives often overlap with those within the humanitarian sector. This will be dependent on the type of crisis, for instance, a fast onset versus protracted crisis, but should always be considered. So there are complementary benefits of connectivity and the auxiliary services available through mobile phones once connectivity is in place, specifically in a humanitarian crisis. And as the line between humanitarian assistance and general development goals continue to blur as crises become more protracted, connecting the complementary goals of humanitarian organisations with development organisations could improve efficiencies in operations and extend revenue opportunities available to mobile network operators, with humanitarian assistance being the stepping stone to achieving broader development goals. Long-term partnerships between mobile network operators and humanitarian organisations are key, as is a mutually beneficial vision that extends beyond just one mobile money-enabled CVA programme, but a digital ecosystem that addresses beneficiaries' needs as well as the host communities. As governments focus on digital transformation strategies and use cases to digitise person to government and government to person payments are explored, linking mobile money-enabled CVA programs to the wider digital transformation agenda further strengthens its value proposition. So moving on to the handbook for mobile money providers, which is made up of 2 sections. Section 1 helps providers determine whether CVA distribution is a strategic opportunity and includes guidance on the humanitarian sector and how it operates. Section 2 provides guidance on executing mobile money-enabled CVA programs successfully. So we identified 7 main stages of operationalizing CVA. The specific details and requirements at each stage will vary across contexts and organizations, but these 7 overarching steps are common features that all mobile money providers and humanitarian organizations have to consider when using mobile money as a disbursement modality for cash and voucher assistance programs. So by way of example, research and local cash working group meetings to ensure mobile network operators understand what is needed. When we speak about building partnerships, we want to emphasize that developing meaningful partnerships early on is also essential. This will ensure that ample time and the necessary levels of investment are understood as early on in the process as possible to enable mobile money providers to effectively deliver CVA. A successful partnership would be one where challenges can be raised through effective dialogue and solutions created and implemented as quickly and effectively as possible. With the training and pilot phase, which would involve leveraging the ideas and solutions created through strategic partnerships and testing them in the field to see if they are appropriate solutions to the problems faced. So one of the major challenges often cited when using mobile money for CVA is the issue of liquidity management. This issue usually arises due to the fact that beneficiaries tend to cash out most, if not all, of their assistance as soon as they receive it, which applies pressure to mobile money agents who do not have enough physical cash to meet this demand. Some innovative strategies have been put in place to address this issue, including surge strategies, which involves hiring additional agents on the day of disbursement, and smooth strategies, which involve staggering payments to beneficiaries so as to alleviate the daily liquidity pressures of agents. So I have 2 examples of when effective partnerships and innovative solutions have enabled the effective delivery of CVA by overcoming a number of challenges faced. It should be noted, though, that context is key. So the challenges and potential solutions to these challenges can vary wildly. This is part of the reason why the research underpinning the handbooks was taken in varying contexts so as to build a fuller picture of the potential challenges that could arise. So in Bidi Bidi settlement camp in Uganda, UNCDF and UNHCR worked with Airtel and MTN Uganda to improve services in the camp. Whilst the MNOs invested heavily in communications and mobile money infrastructure in Bidi Bidi, extra operational and financial support offered by UNCDF helped to develop infrastructure faster. Mercy Corps in Bidi also faced a liquidity challenge when dispersing CVA. They dispersed $10, which was then the equivalent of around 38,000 Ugandan shillings to 650 plus beneficiaries. But when beneficiary numbers increased to 1,500 and the ability to find 3 times 1,000 Uganda shilling notes became more difficult, Airtel partnered with a greater number of financial institutions where mobile money agents could access physical cash and find lower denominated notes more easily. So the second example comes from Somaliland, where in 2010, in response to a severe period of drought, funds from the Ministry of the President through the creation of a National Drought Committee and donations people sent through ZARD, the mobile money service operated by Somtel in Somaliland, to help affected relatives, essentially catalysed humanitarian cash assistance in Somaliland. Mobile money works under unique conditions in Somaliland, as almost all transactions remain digital and are not cashed out. For this reason, mobile money providers in Somaliland do not face the same liquidity pressures that other mobile money providers across the globe face, but they have their own challenges to overcome. One of the most significant challenges is to do with identification, and is a problem that is not unique to mobile money, but any service that requires identification to access. 52% of adults in Somalia report not having an ID, which presents a significant barrier to accessing services. To overcome this, ZARD holds a digital ID of customers which they use for verification during each transaction. We published a report on BiddyBuddy in 2017, which is available to download from our website, and we will soon publish a case study on Somaliland, with both publications going into greater detail on how operations were amended to ensure successful mobile money operations. So, what does it take to be an enabling partner for cash and voucher assistance programs as a mobile network operator? Firstly, there is a need to evaluate goals and the operating environment. This would involve engaging with the humanitarian community, as mentioned, to help providers understand humanitarian plans and goals, and ensure a private sector perspective is included. This could be done, for example, by joining local cash working group meetings, and these meetings in themselves can be seen as a source of inspiration for innovative approaches that address the challenges faced in the field. It is crucial to quantify and outline individual costings in the proposal, contract, or even separately in a detailed service level agreement. There should also be information on the service level quality standards in the request for proposal issued by humanitarian organisations. So by tying higher prices to high quality services, we can help humanitarian organisations understand the value of their increased investment, demonstrating that higher costs often equates to higher quality of services. For example, incorporating field operations to support the training of beneficiaries. This in itself would come at a cost, but it would be one that was worth investing in. Demonstrating a deep understanding of humanitarians' needs and beneficiaries' plight will help MNOs ensure they put protocols in place that will protect the safety and dignity of the beneficiaries involved. If subsidies are needed, ensure they can be included in the bid, but also clarify how they will translate into a sustainable service in the future. And finally, invest in innovation and long-term competitive advantage. There is high potential for innovation because while initial experiences with digital CVA delivery has yielded a wealth of insights about how systems might be improved, there are not many new offerings on the market that fill these demand gaps. In the long term, set aside time to work on auxiliary product development, including other mobile products that may not be based on mobile money, but make the overall value proposition to the humanitarian organisation more dynamic and appealing. Bundling these options with other mobile-enabled services can further strengthen relationships with humanitarian organisations. And what does it take to be an enabling partner for mobile money-enabled cash assistance for humanitarian organisations? Humanitarians should work with donors to allocate sufficient time and funding for mobile money to be successfully leveraged. As Jenny pointed out at the beginning of this webinar, there was a time when mobile money was seen as a cheap and easy delivery mechanism, but it can be a superior option if invested in sufficiently. Humanitarians should form long-term partnerships that go beyond short-term CVA projects and ensure a long-term vision is maintained even when working on only one programme. We should invest in customized CVA services, as off-the-shelf products may not be suitable for extreme environments. It should also be noted too that costs saved on transfer fees may be shifted to the beneficiary, so it's important to understand when a lower cost proposal is due to costs actually being saved as opposed to simply being shifted. For instance, provider A may offer services at half the price of provider B, but only have agents half as close to beneficiaries. In this case, by choosing provider A, costs are not necessarily saved, but some costs are shifted to the beneficiaries, who now must travel further to retrieve their money. help M&Os de-risk investments where possible and appropriate, especially if at stages 1 or 2, with no existing coverage or financial ecosystem set up. For example, through a loss guarantee agreement that de-risks investments for M&Os. If there are any way to assist M&Os with diverse revenue streams beyond bulk payments, could strengthen the business case, as discussed earlier, and coordinating with cash working groups to engage with other humanitarian organisations to aggregate demand and increase efficiency. And finally, link to recovery phase actors, where appropriate, like government programmes, to further strengthen the value proposition of leveraging mobile money. The common donor approach to humanitarian cash programming sees donors expecting to see cash programmes used, linked to, or align with local and national mechanisms such as social protection systems, where possible and appropriate. Essentially, both humanitarian organisations and mobile network operators need to form close working relationships built on trust, a mutual understanding of goals, and share a long-term vision for mobile money to be an effective mechanism. By doing this, the wider benefits that connectivity brings will also be felt by all stakeholders involved, including the most important, the beneficiaries we are aiming to assist. That's everything. Thank you very much for listening. But one last thing to wrap up the presentation. As Jenny mentioned earlier, we are pleased to announce that the GSMA Mobile for Humanitarian Innovation Fund Round 3 is now live. This round aims to promote innovation in the use of mobile technology to address humanitarian challenges, specifically in complex emergencies and forced displacement contexts. So there will be funding available between £50,000 and £500,000 per project, as well as mentoring, networking, project support and promotion. And this funding round will support grantees to adapt existing mobile-enabled solutions, test and validate new models of service delivery, or scale up solutions with proven potential for impact. So as I mentioned, applications are now being accepted and will continue to be accepted until Friday, 7th of June. Please do not hesitate to contact us with any questions you may have, and we'll be sure to help where we can or direct you to the right person who will be able to assist you further. And again, thank you for listening. Both my and Jenny's email address are up on the screen. Just a last little note, the M4H team has done a lot of work on mobile money enabled cash and voucher assistance, and we will continue to do so. Our strategic partnerships team is working with a number of programs that are involving mobile money and CVA, and our innovation team is actively working, as mentioned, with grantees who are and are actually looking to receive applications from organisations that are partnering with mobile network operators, including those using mobile money as part of their operations. We have tons of useful publications on our website, and we're happy to do a deep dive of the handbooks for any individual organisations if any are interested. So yeah, please reach out to us with any questions you may have, but we'll try our best to answer as many questions as we can right now in the remaining time.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Belinda and Jenny. That was a really interesting, I guess, just giving us a little sort of a brief overview, because there's so much information, no doubt, in the handbooks and in the reports that you're talking about there. But it's really interesting to see how two very different organisations can come together for the benefit of particularly vulnerable people, and solving issues and challenges such as liquidity. And also, having to overcome a lot of challenges as well. And obviously it involves a lot of, like you said, time, energy and investment for the two quite different organisations to come together and work successfully together. So I'm going to try and manage our Q&As that have come through so far. And if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to post in the Q&A, and Belinda and Jenny are going to answer them for me. So let's start with some questions about the clients themselves. So can you tell us a little more about the profile of those clients who need the training to make the most of mobile money? So I'm guessing like a little bit more detail about the profile from Joseph. And also Fahad simply mentioned, are there any cultural or social or barriers that are impacting on the gender aspect when it comes to women using mobile money?
Sure, thank you very much for your question.
Jenny, we can't hear you. I certainly can't. I'm not sure if anyone else can.
Can you hear me now?
A little clearer, yes.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. In terms of the profile of the clients who need training to make the most of mobile money, the short answer is it's completely context specific, but we found, especially in Rwanda, in Kiziba, and in Bidi Bidi in Uganda, there are fairly low digital literacy rates and also high illiteracy rates. Once we publish that research, all of that data will be there. I don't have the figures off the top of my head. We also actually found surprisingly high illiteracy rates among Syrian refugees in Jordan. So it was certainly an issue across each of the three contexts that we studied. And we also found that there is not only a digital or mobile gender gap, but we found that there is a gap between persons with disabilities and also persons without disabilities. So we specifically looked at more vulnerable populations, and we have a whole section in the research that will come out focusing on gender and inclusivity, which will give you a more it's very context specific, but we did find many people who were certainly in need of additional.
Great, thank you. We have another question coming in from Fahad. What is the cash usage and associated belief people have? How do and are merchants accepting mobile money, and what resistance is being encountered from that side?
I'm not sure what the question is.
So I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I'll try my best. So in terms of the merchants, whether they're accepting mobile money or not, in terms of the agent network in Bidi Bidi, it is it's still kind of being expanded upon and extended, and that's some of the work that UNCDF was doing to help finance some of the improved liquidity and agent network for the mobile network operators there. The agents in those regions are being relied on a lot to support some of the beneficiaries using mobile money because they're not so familiar with the technology. Yeah, sorry if I haven't quite understood the question.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. Got a couple of questions here, very similar, to do with kind of identification and authentication. So MD Rashid, who has had experience working with the Rohingya crisis in Bangladesh, has also said that customer identification and authentication is challenging. And Maxime as well is asking, is it possible to use biometrics to authenticate transactions? Can you tell us a little bit more about sort of how that aspect is working?
Sure. So one of the major barriers that we've seen specifically for refugees
Jenny and Belinda, are you still with us? We seem to have lost Belinda, and Jenny I can see has only got a video going, and I think we've lost the audio. So let's give them a couple of minutes and see if they can connect back through to us.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you now. Perfect. We lost you there, but you're back. Great.
I'm just connected on the other laptop.
Perfect.
So I was just saying that this identification challenge is one of the major ones that we've been trying to tackle, because refugees have to have often a refugee ID to be able to register for a SIM card in their own name, and also to be able to register for mobile money in their own name. We found in this research in these 3 countries that it's been a challenge in all 3, because often the issuance of this type of identification is quite slow, and therefore it means that it doesn't mean that people don't necessarily have a SIM card, but it might mean that they're not registered in their own name, which means that they can't make the most of the benefits of those mobile services, especially for mobile money. So we've been working with our digital identity team here at GSMA to advocate and work with governments to try and encourage, in countries where it makes sense, for UNHCR ID to be accepted, and encourage the regulator to ensure that mobile operators can use the identification that those refugees actually have access to. Bangladesh is a challenging one, because still today refugees can't register for mobile services with the identification that they currently have. But this is a large advocacy and policy piece that we're doing, that our policy team is leading on.
Yeah, and just to add, in terms of the biometrics, it doesn't overcome the issue of needing to have an identification that is recognised by the government. So yes, biometrics are being used in some contexts to verify beneficiaries, but they still would need the necessary documentation as stipulated by the government or the regulator in terms of actually registering for a SIM card or a mobile money account.
So that regulatory environment and the enabling environment that you talked about is really, it just shows you really how key it is for this to be able to work.
Exactly.
And sorry, just one other thing. So often we do find that mobile operators really do want to provide these services to refugees, to expand their customer base, but also support these people, but they can't because the government and the regulation doesn't allow it yet in some.
Well, we can only hope that things like the work that you're doing, and also our DFI own alumni as well, can actually help desensitize and actually overcome some of these barriers in the long term. Okay, we've got another question from Maxine, which I think is quite interesting, regarding access to mobile handsets, and also I'm going to chip in and say about the data as well. How is that being made more affordable? Is there sort of specific packaging, packaging, etc., that refugees could use, for example?
Yeah, so there are a number of different ways in which refugees are accessing these handsets. Generally, these handsets aren't provided for free from the mobile operator, because there's often not a sustainable business case there, especially in these really complex and hard to reach areas. It's difficult for mobile operators to put the mobile coverage up in the first place and make a return, let alone kind of providing handsets as well. But they're certainly thinking about some innovative financing models to reduce the upfront cost of particularly smartphones. So we've seen lots of examples of some pay-as-you-go solar energy companies who are providing solar home systems which include smartphones, for example, which people can pay off via mobile money over the course of, say, 1 year, to make these services more available to people. One thing that I'd also say that we've seen through our research and our work on the ground is often when handsets are provided for free, it may not be the result in the best outcome. We've seen some examples of humanitarian organizations giving phones out for free, but they're very low quality handsets, and they are not robust enough to withstand some of the difficult environments. We've seen examples of the batteries actually physically expanding in the heat. And so people who are recipients of these types of programs are not, the phones do not last in the long term. So we have a program here at GSMA called Connected Society, who have done some research to look at these innovative financing models for handsets. We have a report that we can share with you to give lots of different examples of ways to ensure that handsets are affordable and available to people in all types of different environments.
Great, Jenny, thanks. And you can send me the links as well, and I can share the links with the recording, and they'll get posted onto the DFI website, so we can make sure that everyone has access to all those links that you're talking about as well.
Great, thanks.
And connected to that question, Fahad has been asking whether it's some of the uses is via USSD or through apps on the mobile phones themselves, and do any of them give better results in terms of adoption?
I don't think we can really speak about in terms of adoption because it's all very quite context specific, but I guess the beauty of mobile money is that it can be accessed via USSD. So in the East African context, so Kaziba and Bidi Bidi, the likelihood is that the majority are on basic or feature phones, so they can access basic services and are able to use mobile money. But in the Jordan context, they're more likely to be able to access mobile money services via a smartphone app. There are a plethora of benefits that obviously come with having a smartphone app, if that was possible, but a lot of, because you're able to amend the user experience and the user interface to be a bit more specific to the context within the context that they're working in. But in reality, in the context that we're working in the humanitarian context, the main thing is the basic phone, being able to access mobile money, financial services through USSD without having to think about kind of smart applications, or for a population that are more likely to be more low literate and digitally literate, we're really conscious of the fact that USSD is still the #1 in these contexts.
And just to give an example from what I was presenting earlier, we found that the rate of internet-enabled phone adoption in Kaziba and in Bidi Bidi was less than 50%. So most of the population is certainly accessing mobile money via USSD on basic phones or potentially feature phones, but very few people in these contexts still have smartphones.
Interesting. Thank you, to see the ways in which we can provide access to the money. What else have we got here? So we've got a question from Gerald in Zimbabwe. Just wondering what you think on the Zimbabwe. Does it have an enabling environment, or due to the issues that they're currently facing with cash, is it more of a no choice but to use mobile money environment?
So we've seen, we haven't done any specific research in our humanitarian program in Zimbabwe to date, but we have read some very good research from CARE, who have partnered with, I think it was Econet and potentially another mobile money provider some years ago. And they have a really good research that goes into detail of their experiences there, and it seemed to work fairly well. On our mobile money metrics website, you can go in and look at Zimbabwe and see how many live mobile money services there are. So there are currently 4. So to our knowledge, mobile money is, sorry, just one.
We'll just give Jenny and Belinda a second. I think they've got a little technical glitch their side.
So sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, so we have 4 live mobile money services, and Belinda also has some information on the regulatory index.
Yeah, so we have the regulatory index that is on our mobile money. Sorry, that's on our mobile money metrics website. It's a score between 0 and 100, which essentially lets you know what the enabling environment is for mobile money services within a country. There's a whole plethora of different metrics that are used to measure this, but I'm not sure of the details. It's all on the website. Zimbabwe has got a score of 75, which is pretty reasonable for a metric between 0 and 100. But as the questioner mentioned, it is a unique environment. The humanitarian crisis essentially catalyzed mobile money services there because of the fact that there wasn't any specific cash available for people to be able to use. So we don't want to keep pushing the whole idea that context is really important, but context is so important in these discussions, that one issue that occurs in one place is not likely to be, even if it sounds like it's the same issue, the solutions that are necessary to overcome that issue will just be so context specific. So as I said, with Somaliland, it's similar to Zimbabwe, a very digital society, more digital than several countries in the West, but it's circumstantial that has tended to push them into that direction, but they've also seen the benefits of mobile money, so it's continuing it as well. So yeah, essentially keep context in mind, but Zimbabwe does seem to be an environment where it is enabling circumstantial government. I'm not sure what the weight is on that, but if these wants to have a look at the regulatory index, that can go into a bit more detail about the specific regulatory of the enabling environment there.
Great. Thank you for giving us some ideas of where we can go to look for the information. And we always say a lot in many of our DFI courses, what often goes wrong is the copying and paste approach, because the context is so important. And it seems like it's even more important. There's no differences here.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll just try and get a couple more questions done before we have to, unfortunately, end the webinar. So I've got one here from Michelle de Groot. Having regular users is also a result of different technology developments of the mobile playing field. Are there good examples or practice in which development partners can stimulate other forms of mobile technology that can have benefits on developing mobile money applications?
Sorry, could you just say that again? I didn't quite get the question.
It's the second question if you want to jump into the Q&A box. So are there any good practices or examples in which development partners can stimulate other forms of mobile technology that can have benefits on developing mobile money applications?
I don't think we have any examples that we can bring to that. In terms of developing applications, in terms of on a smartphone or just general?
I think just generally, if you've got any, but if you haven't, maybe we can think about it and we can circulate some examples after the webinar.
Yeah, that would be great. Sorry, I can't think of anything to hand right now.
That's okay, no problem. It puts you on the spot, the webinar, but no worries, we can come back to that one. And I'm just taking a look at the last few questions that we've got here to see. Maxime has asked about maximum limits for transactions, and do they prevent refugees being able to receive or send money abroad?
I think, again, sorry to hammer on about being context specific. It depends on the services that are available in the country. So whether they have any agreements with cross-border transactions, so for international remittances. So depending on the context, depending on the location, it would be possible. And it of course depends on what type of mobile wallet the refugee is also working in. So if they have an open wallet that they're able to access all of the services, and there happens to be services where they're able to send money internationally, then they'll be able to do that. And the limits would be dependent on the mobile network operator that they're working with. But yeah, it's very context specific. So in some contexts, completely open, same services as the rest of the population. In other contexts, it might not be the same. There might not be a mechanism to actually transfer money across borders.
Okay. Yep, so again, very context specific, but thank you for giving us some of the different things that we would need to consider to be able to answer that question there from Maxine. And I'm going to take one last question from Fahad and Kareem, who seem to be working together. Can you give us, and they've asked for top 5, but maybe you can just give us a couple of the main challenges and how they can be addressed in the different contexts. So what are a couple of the key challenges that you've seen from using mobile money for CVA?
So the one that comes to mind for me is liquidity management. So as I mentioned, there have been some innovative solutions to kind of overcoming the issue with the fact that at this moment in time, most beneficiaries, however they receive their cash, if they receive it digitally, they tend to cash it out, pretty much the majority of it, not only because they need the cash, but the system in itself might not necessarily be developed enough for them to keep the cash digital. So on the days that beneficiaries receive their cash assistance, there's a big pressure on the agents to be able to be liquid enough to give them all the cash, rather than some beneficiaries having to wait as the agents become more liquid. So there have been different strategies where, clustering agents in a particular location, or rather clustering beneficiaries in a particular location and making sure that there's enough cash on hand for them to receive their assistance, or staggering payments, for example, is another way of being able to do that. So yeah, liquidity management is one of the big ones. And of course, identification. I think that's probably the top two, because that's an area which is difficult to overcome, difficult to change, and without key identification within a specific context, there isn't any access to services. So not just mobile services, but several other services as well.
And I just add one final third one, I think, around digital literacy. And we often find that the beneficiaries of these cash programs are the most vulnerable, and therefore the least likely to be digitally literate. And I think one of the solutions, hopefully, that's come across in this webinar is really the importance of humanitarian organizations working hand in hand with mobile network operators and putting the time and effort needed in, so that both parties have the same end goal, and there's that shared value proposition for what they're both working towards, because there can be shared training programs that we've seen have worked really well in Uganda, where mobile operators train people on how to use their PINs alongside humanitarian organizations who know these beneficiaries so well. So we really see these partnerships as the key to maximizing the potential that mobile money can bring.
Great. I think that's a really nice way to end the webinar. I think it's really important, the shared value proposition that will be different in every context, and it really is important for humanitarian organizations and mobile network providers to work together to try and figure out what that is. But also that I think it's interesting that there is a value proposition and usefulness as well to the vulnerable who need to receive this aid. So I'm just going to say a very big thank you to Jenny and Belinda for spending the last hour for us, talking us through some of these, giving us some real interesting food for thought and places to go and continue doing our research and learning more and figuring out how we are going to adapt and can adapt this maybe to our own markets for where we all work. I'm going to share one of my slides with you, just for those of you who are interested. We at DFI are giving anyone that's joined this webinar a little special discount where people can actually join up to receive a discount on our digital humanitarian payments course with DFI, which does also include a lot of the work and a lot of the ideas that we've heard today. So if anybody hasn't joined up with our CDFP course, or wants to join up to Digital Humanitarian, the final day to enroll is actually Saturday. So please do use that discount code that's on the screen there and sign up via our website. Just a couple of other things as well to remind you all, please, this conversation will continue about various aspects of humanitarian, mobile money, anything to do with digital finance happens in our LinkedIn professionals group, and the link is there on the screen. You can also watch the recording of this webinar or other webinars, or learn about what's coming next via our resources page on the community pages of our website. And I've also put you through there to the link where you can start to download the 2 GSMA handbooks that Belinda and Jenny spoke about today. So thank you everyone for joining. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar, and look forward to chatting with you all at our next webinar. Again, thank you very much, Jenny and Belinda.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Okay, bye everybody.